to welcome you here to the asset class. Today, we're going to be discussing a lot of different information. Here's our disclaimer. We always want you to reach out to licensed professionals with a track record of success. We want to make sure that you do your own research because as we learn more, we grow more. Each one, reach one, teach one. That's how we learn and grow as a community.
Absolutely. And as we continue deeper into Black History Month, it's just interesting times that we find ourselves in. So I woke up, I opened up my Facebook, and I see a post that was shared by Representative Regina English, and it had the bodies of monkeys and the faces of President Obama and First Lady Michelle Obama. And I said, yo, and it was the meme, it was like reflecting as though the current president had shared that image on his social media platform. So in these times of AI generated nonsense, I got to go to the source and see. So I went to the president's Truth Social page because, again, I need to see this for myself to make sure that it ain't no...
That's not fugazi.
Right. One of the things that was very astonishing was how active he is on social media. Like, I didn't know how active he is on social media. Like, it was a lot of fucking posts. For that one to had just went out not too long ago, you know what I mean? Like, I was scrolling. I'm like, where the fuck is this post at? And by that time, he had already deleted it. Bruh. In Black History Month, like the tone deaf, actually, it's not even tone deaf. It's flat out just not even giving a fuck. Like, it's no...
It's the opposite of empathy,
right?
And it is using selective ignorance, wink, wink, to appease others. Because, he was 17 years old when major things were happening in the civil rights movement. He was a man when Martin Luther King was assassinated. He knows all about the lawsuits that his father went through for discrimination against Black people for making these different statements. And his father was a member of the Klan. We have documentation that says that. So there's no oopsie daisy. It's intentional.
Very much so. Now, with that, one of the redeeming moments, the Super Bowl halftime show, I saw a lot of the discourse that went on around that. And for me, I draw the parallel to last year's with Kendrick Lamar, because last year's Super Bowl performance, not everybody understood what was going on. Like, it was a lot going on in that show. A whole lot. And a lot of people, it went smooth over their head. Like, they could not process it. They could not understand it, so they couldn't appreciate it. And obviously, like, to you and I, everything hit. It was like, yo, whoa, did you see? Whoa. Like,
yes, making an American flag out of Black bodies. That has to be one of the most powerful images I've seen in my life, because it represents the fact that everything was built on top of the back. And I'm not going to say everything, because if someone's going to be in the comments, you didn't qualify your statement. What aboutisms are for the unintelligent mind? Okay. So the vast majority of what really got America going was built on the backs of Black and brown bodies. So with us being the flag as a symbol, but also having a man stand above that, like, we were the platform to launch this global Goliath that is the United States of America, biggest military in the world, having the petroleum-based dollar in our currency, all built off of that. man, that I was shook. I didn't even snap back into the game until midway through half the third quarter because I was still processing.
It was incredible, man. Again, as I listened to didn't listen to, but saw some of the blowback of it, and it's just like it was another representation of the beautiful mosaic that the United States was designed to be. Now, we have our struggles in living up to that design, but it was always structured for the country to represent multiple cultures and freedom and liberty and unity. And that was brilliantly reflected in Bad Bunny's performance.
When it came through the sugarcane field, man, I grabbed my mama's arm. I was like, oh, they're coming through the sugarcane fields. Do you know what that means? Do you know how Puerto Ricans were worked? Do you know how people from the West Indies were worked in sugarcane fields? And we're not talking about ancient history. We're talking about people with cases in 2017 getting worked in these sugarcane fields, making $3 an hour, trying to get visas. Now, if you're Puerto Rican, that's not your case. You're already an American citizen. But man, them hopping up on the light poles to represent, what happened after Hurricane Maria. Please correct me if it's not Maria. Right. But knowing there was this
when the current president in his first term was throwing paper towels at people.
Yeah. Yo, it was the most terrible. It was so terrible. It was funny that he was Jordan, hitting people in the head. I was just like, this is probably the most disconnected American leader that we have ever had, or maybe close to it. Andrew Jackson was absolutely insane. And that's a whole nother conversation. Like, he might be the first person that discovered PCP because he is out of his mind. But as far as being disconnected from the people, so for Bad Bunny to have the presence of mind to put that into the performance, and it wasn't a quick thing. He was up there a long time because a lot of people lost their livelihood, their businesses. And man, I was blown away. And like you said, the dialogue that came from it, we definitely saw the certain crowd that we knew would be there. It was the worst thing ever. I only watched it because I wanted to make sure I knew how terrible it was. We got the smaller subset trying to tell you that Kid Rock was amazing and he's bringing people to God. And I was like, maybe with bad drugs and alcohol, like he'll get you there quick. Might not be the God you want, but that's not my job. That's not my lane. I think one of the more interesting conversations I saw was between the two brothers. And I don't know if this is calculated on their part because I think they're both masters of social media. But the Logan brothers, did you see that? The dialogue they had back and forth?
No, I didn't.
Bro,
I can only imagine what.
So Jake, initially, he goes on this rant, and it's a very right-leaning rant. He's talking about how he didn't want to see it. It's in Spanish. It was horrible. So he's representing that sentiment. His brother said, yes, I was going to come back there. Yes, he lives there. He lives in Puerto Rico. And it is part of why he is so successful as a boxer because he's getting a gigantic tax break there. Remember, guys, I'm a certified tax and business advisor. One of the best things you can do is moving to Puerto Rico when you're at a certain wealth class because they have a whole bunch of assets where you get to escape taxes on, and there's a whole bunch of things you could do. That's a conversation to be had later. But he benefits from it. And his brother says, no, you got it wrong. This is the melting pot. We are many different cultures, many different languages, and that's what brings the strength of America, and that's what makes America America. You got to rethink this, my brother, and I love you deeply. And I love the interaction. Now, was it probably fabricated and they were on the phone for 2 hours and they had Chat GPT and a PR person? Probably. I mean, we're talking about multi-million-dollar brands that they have just between their social media presence, right? So even if this is, perfectly crafted, I still love the interaction because one, just because you disagree with someone does not mean you dislike that person. We need to get that up out of our system. I have friends that are so right leaning, my God. And the same thing, I have friends so left leaning. And over the years, the different functions that I've thrown, and they're able to sit at the same table and we're able to help out kids. We're able to petition to help senior citizens not pay so much estate taxes. We're able to do good things in the community, even though they couldn't be further away on the political spectrum, which is also an illusion because we're all people. We have more things in common than we have different. So I really appreciated being able to see that.
So that was definitely a highlight. And another was, and I got to kind of pick back up on from last week because I've been mixing up proclamations. So the city council voted against Black Business Month being proclaimed this year. And it wasn't like there was a danger of the city council not voting to declare Black History Month through proclamation this year, but it wasn't as like smooth as usual. So, groups stepped up and voiced their concerns, and all in all, the proclamation is going to be presented tomorrow, and that's when I'll be giving that speech. But Mayor Yemi actually did the Black History Month proclamation last Wednesday at the Caffeinated Cow here in Colorado Springs, which is Black owned.
Powerful business there.
Yeah. So I got a text on Tuesday, like, can we arrange for Black Chamber representation to be there because Mayor Yemi specifically requested it? And I was like, all right, bet. So myself and Felicia, who is the secretary, ended up showing up for the reading of the proclamation. And it was just incredible, man. Truly incredible, and also a bit disheartening that we got politics floating around the conversation, and that's locally here in the Springs. Because again, like we talk about on this show all the time, the stuff that's going on at the federal level is a circus clown show inside of a dumpster fire. Like it's embarrassing. But to have that nastiness reverberate here locally, again, it just kind of zeroes in the importance of the work. So we're going to take all of that misfortune and turn it into gold, where on the heels of the Black History Month proclamation being read and delivered by Mayor Yemi inside of the Caffeinated Cow last week, that transitions into next month, where we got the Boom Your Business initiative that we're going to be kicking off. And what that is the Black Chamber intentionally driving traffic to local Black-owned businesses to begin with, and it'll expand once that time comes. But it's driving true quantifiable traffic, not like in theory, an actual structured process for us to understand what the true ROI of the event in their brick and mortar, like what it delivered. So that's the first leg of it. And then the second leg of it is, you familiar with 1 Million Cups?
Yes, sir.
All right. So it's going to have that that 1 million cups element as far as the business owner having the opportunity to tell their story to the audience, to really kind of facilitate those connections, because we all do the things that we do entrepreneurially for our respective reasons. And it's important to like share that true, authentic why, and also speak about some of the challenges and opportunities that have presented themselves along the way. So it's going to have that component. And then thirdly, we know the baby shower kind of feel, where whenever that folks show up for baby showers, they come with things that's going to ease the process of that baby coming into the, so if it's Pampers or what have you. Well, the third component is going to be a business shower, where everyone is encouraged to bring like value. How can you provide value to the host of the event? So each Boom Your Business, we're going to be bringing in that quantified traffic, encouraging the entire audience to patronize the establishment. The story of the owner will unite everybody in the room, because that's what happens at 1 million cups every week, is as those entrepreneurial stories are being had, it's uniting everyone in the room and creating a different type of synergy. So between that intentional kind of, and then the encouragement of the business shower kind of mindset as well, to like, how am I bringing value to this event, as opposed to looking to extract, like, how am I actually bringing value? So
I love that.
Yeah, it's we kicking that off next month on Friday the 13th, March 13th. So yeah, we're gonna be doing that at the Caffeinated Cow. So bro, you definitely got to put that on your calendar to pull up 6 o'clock. If you're gonna
Hey,
be
I'm not gonna meet you there because I'm gonna beat you there.
my man. But yeah, we gonna really grow it and make it what it needs to be, so that next year when we talking about the Black Business Month proclamation, there's a constituency behind it. Because it's one thing for these conversations to be had offline in dark alleys, and it's another for an engaged business community to say, oh, you voted what down? Let's talk about that. Right? Because there's a constituency, again, that's going to defend it, which is not all the way there right now. Through all of the challenges and frustrations that come along with some of the nonsense that's happening in these times, there's so much more opportunity, and that is what keeps my cup runneth over.
I think we said it before, maybe on the 4th episode, but in many Asiatic languages, the term chaos and opportunity are the exact same thing.
And speaking of that, when we think about Governor Westmore, who is, I mean, dude is like, it's like constructed out of a movie. The way
he's incredible.
Yeah, like he's just a solid individual and governor, and he's the
vice chair of the NGA.
Right, the vice chair.
The vice chair.
Right. So like, not like no token sitting, like,
for our classmates to know, there are always different levels to this. Like what Jesse does as a business coach, he is at the top echelon of helping people out at the zenith. And that's why his capacity is 5 times higher than your next, whatever they want to call themselves, the same way I operate. For this particular governor, this dude is so incredible. Not only is he going above and beyond for all of his citizens in Maryland, but he's also helping other governors out in their own states with knowledge, with leadership, with resources, with models. He's giving real answers to them. Like, this dude is the top of the top. And that's what makes it even crazier.
The fact that it's politics being played, because the meetings that happen between the executive branch at the federal level and the respective executive branches in each, in each state is vitally critical to our unity. So to have a situation in which the governor has been disinvited from the National Governors Association dinner is, I think about it from the context of the precedent that's being set. Because, once certain things happen, it gives license for, for it to get even deeper in of nastiness. So what does a future, like, we've seen so much politics being inserted into everything. What does that look like in the future as this now becomes a new president?
I think first we have to make sure we state the obvious, that this gentleman, Governor Westmore, the vice chair of the National Governors Association, where he leads other state governors, is the only one that is not invited to the dinner that's going to be happening. What is that, next week?
Mm-hmm.
He's the only one. He also happens to be the only Black governor that we have. So we're talking about someone who is so ridiculously qualified. It's ridiculous. It's one of those situations, like Jesse and I are both the same guy, where we're not pulling the race card out of nowhere, because there are plenty of times where I was not good enough. So I got back in the lab and I made sure that I was incredible. 2 L's make a W. However, when you have someone who is so incredible by many different metrics, we're talking about how the state functions financially. We're talking about how happy the people are in the state, how easy it is to do commerce, how safe it is in the state, and his ability to lead and aid other governors. And this is the guy that doesn't get invited? That's where it turns to, well, what could it be? It's a bipartisan thing, so there are other Democrats going there. California is going to be there. His arch enemy, according to his Truth Social. California is going to be there, but he's not invited. So what does this mean, and where is the accountability from the other governors? It is the first place my mind goes, where that this is wrong. I've already seen, the representative from Kentucky say something. I've seen Democratic state governors say something. But as a collective whole, wrong is wrong. And he has a seat there at the table because he set up the table. He coordinated the event that he's not invited to. It just makes me think we keep revisiting this time frame. It's the 1950s all over again, where you could be the most talented singer, dancer, musician, even fighter in the world. You get a medal from the president, or you could be an incredible soldier, and then the ball that they throw in your honor, you're not allowed to go to because of your skin.
The story of OJ. There's a
story of OJ.
There's a bar for that.
Hove.
Yeah,
we're talking about Hove, y'all. You got to listen to 444.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, Kanye said it as well. I know they don't want me in the damn club. They even made me show ID to get inside of Sam's Club. It's unfortunate, and I mean, it's just so par for the course. You know what I mean? Like, Like I can't say that I'm shocked, surprised, none of that. Like, yep, that I could see that happening, and that's what's
Hmm.
wrong.
Yeah,
But
there's no words for it. It's like we are emotioned out because it's such a blitzkrieg of just
bullshit.
nonsense.
Yeah.
It's so much. It's like, how can we maintain, keep our cup full so we're doing what we need to do on this podcast for our clients, for our families, for our communities? And then there's all this going on. It almost becomes difficult to react to. And I'm sure there's a psychological term for it. And before the next episode, I promise y'all I'll do my homework and we're going to learn what that term is. Or if you know it, put it in the chat below. Make sure to like, subscribe, and share, by the way. If we've added value to you, please help us add value to others. That's what we're here for.
To your point, because for it to just kind of be a compound effect, every week that we come in to film these episodes, it's just a more dogpiling of what is huh what every week is that. So in order to not be in a constant state of rage, it's critical to have a game plan. Again, we reiterate this every week. The world is foundationally changing. What it's going to look like on the other side, I have no idea. But what I do know is the assets that I am building value into now will benefit greatly from my understanding of what's happening right now and what I'm doing as a result of that understanding. And that is what this program delivers. Regardless of what's going on, there is an out, there is a game plan, there is a brighter day. Because when we talk about the biggest wealth transfers in history,
Mm-hmm.
bruh, right now, we see all of the layoffs that are going on right now. We see the constant devaluing of the US dollar.
Mm-hmm.
We see the significant interruptions. I allude to it with the job layoffs, but the AI impacts. We're seeing all of these things. So the idea of just kind of being comfortable with what has always been when we are living in unconventional times would be ill-advised. So again, as we talk about these things, none of them come through the lens of, creating mass rage and frustration. Like this is where you get to put the game plan together and execute. Because this information is it's out there. The world is foundationally changing. How everybody responds to it is going to make the difference on how they're able to enjoy or, the latter as things shake out.
You said it, brother. It's all about stacking assets and learning how the wheel shifts. I think one of the most interesting things from the conversations I've had from people that mentor me and people that are, 4 and 5 and 8 steps ahead of where I am in my entrepreneurial journey, where they have hundreds of millions of dollars. And they're talking about how they stopped buying real estate for this time being, or more likely, they stopped buying real estate in the United States and they're buying in other places right now. So it seems like there's a huge shift where there's a very, very high chance that we see a pullback in equity across real estate across the nation, just because the market is so fake. It's like the market is behind on making enough homes for people. Most homes are probably overvalued 30% at least. We have people where they're paying close to 50% of their household earnings on just their dwelling. That's not a sustainable model. We see rents coming down. We've seen commercial real estate completely collapse in certain cities. So it's like you shift and you buy smartly, and you might buy land instead of buying physical structures. You know, land is one of those things that there's not too much more of it getting made. I know someone's going to be like, but in Dubai, yeah, they do magic in Dubai and they make land sometimes. But for the most part, there's not more land being made.
To the point, when we think about real estate as an asset class, there is a rich history in this country. And just like last week when we spoke about the evolution of being cargo to being the drivers of capital, when you think about the history of real estate and how it's been systematically structured and how that has impacted and or advantaged our community, what says you to that point?
My man, this is powerful. This is something where we could have 2, 3, 4 episodes to talk about it. I think the first thing that I want to say is a qualifying statement. This is not about us being in victimhood. This is a diagnosis of what actually happened. And that's very important to know what systems were created, what were the effects of those, and how many generations does that carry? So we could talk about real solutions. Otherwise, we get solutions that don't do anything for the community. An example would be opportunity zones. There are huge tax benefits in certain cities. So we have California, we have Florida, we have Texas, we have a few different places where if you are doing real estate in these certain zones and certain cities in these states, you get gigantic tax benefits, possibly grants, possibly funding. And these programs were meant to be I'm sorry for the structural racism that went into barring our Black people, brown people from acquiring the assets of real estate and being in commerce. But we talk about constituents. There are many people who hop in and say it's not fair. And they're like, okay. And they changed the way it worked where it was only going to pay Black people for getting involved in these programs to it being anyone. And now over 87% of people that are benefiting from opportunity zones are white. It's crazy. Of how
but is it really crazy? Because even when we look at the civil rights movement and like who the civil rights movement like benefited the most, white women. Historically, this is just how it's been.
Right. There really hasn't been a true indemnification for these systems. And we're going to talk about where we got close in 97. But before that, so with our last episode, that was part 1 of our Black History Month shows. And we talked about insurance. We talked about how we were cargo and how we were insured. Even though it was against religious doctrine, they found ways to get around it. And then we just changed everyone's religion. Oh, you're a Christian, we can have life insurance now. We can have this, we can have that. And how people made vast amounts of wealth off of the insurance, but also how these insurance companies built a vast amount of wealth for themselves. These companies are still around. We're talking about New York Life. We're talking about AIG. We're talking about Baltimore Life. We're talking about multi-billion and trillion-dollar entities that made the lion's share of their biggest profits off the backs of Black people. Now, when we transfer from that time period, because that left us right around the 1850s. So that's when like Baltimore Life was cranking it out. 2/3 of their profits are coming from enslaved people insurance. Once again, like I said on the last episode, we're going to be careful with our words because these people were not slaves. These people were enslaved. We're talking about highly capable, hard-working people that were being held against their will to profit for others. That is an enslaved person, not a slave. Now, 1850, we're getting to the point where some Black people have dissented, some people have gone up north, and they're starting to become more prosperous. Now, racism was different up north. Like, you're free, but you're not free to be equal. And, you know, a left haymaker from somebody will remind you real quick to be in your place, especially if you're in Massachusetts. You know, they, man, had some wild stuff going on there. And we also have to remember that, like, this is the beginning of the Civil War happening, where sides are dissenting. We have Black and white people fighting for the Union, and then we have some Black people that fight for the Confederacy because they're like, hey, if you help us fight, we know we're going to win. No one can beat the South. We're going to give you your freedom. Even though we never gave it to you your whole life, we'll give you your freedom if you fight for us. And some did. And what we saw was Lincoln signing the Emancipation Proclamation, and then Black people really going hard because the Emancipation Proclamation really was more just for the northern states and for the Union. But so many Black people left and went up north, and no one could run the farms. The initial laws were saying, hey, bring them back. You know, they're still property. And it was just too many people. It broke the system. So everyone really became free. And that's how we have Juneteenth, because we had Texas plantation runners who would not let the Black man be free. Cool. So Lincoln says, look, here's what we got to do. We got all this land that used to belong to Confederates. I'm not going to penalize them because you guys are telling me they should all go to the gallows or they should go to prison because they did an insurrection on the United States. And with that, you know what? We're gonna let this slide, and we're gonna rebuild the country together through love and tolerance. Well, Lincoln gets shot in the head, and his plans dried up very quickly because the idea was to repropagate wealth to the Black community. You've heard so many people, we talked about Kendrick Lamar's performance, how many times he said 40 acres and a mule. And I had a friend at the Super Bowl party that I went to who is a white woman, and she's like, she didn't know what it meant. Googled it. Went home, watched the whole documentary on it. Next time I saw her, she's like, I had no idea. That's why rappers say 40 acres and a mule. And she's like, now I know why Spike Lee, his production company is called 40 Acres and a Mule. She's like, I had no idea that all of this was promised to free Black men. It's like, yes. So we were promised initially, you know, General Sherman, who's a Union general, he met with 20 Black pastors, well, ministers, and said, hey, we need to repropagate these assets here. And it wasn't the best land that was owned by the Confederates. It was some land. A lot of it was close to the beach. A lot of it was hard and thorny. But they're like, hey, we're going to give this to you, 18,000 families here. And it worked out to be roughly 40 acres. So that's where 40 acres and a mule comes from. These families got to working so hard and rotating the crops because Black people have always been a genius with crops. That's why even in ancient times, we see the Western Europeans come to Africa to try to get people from Senegal, try to get people from where Ghana is to help them with their crops when they're going through famine. It's always been known in the ancient world. So these people were rotating crops and they were getting such a high yield that through this act, Sherman's act, it's like, you know what? Give them a mule as well so they can produce even more because they were already out yielding white farmers with little to no tools, little to no animals. It was an incredible time. And this land stretched from basically South Carolina up North Florida and Georgia. 2 years into this deal, well, before I even say that, we have westward expansion that's happening at the same time. So we're trying to move west of the Mississippi, and the government is just granting land like crazy. We have Louisiana Purchase that happens, and it like triples the size of the United States. And we get all this new land, we get Great Plains, we get different forests. We end up getting a bunch of land from Mexico. And initially, it was the best time in history for Black people because we got land and we got a hand up, not a handout. We got really, really hard, rough land, and we tilled it and we worked it. And we were able to live on our own. Well, the next president was a Confederate apologist. So he wanted to make sure he was still good with all the Confederates, the insurrectionists. He decides to renege on this and pull land back by any means. Now, we are stepping into the land of modern farming because the cotton gin was already created and rotating crops is a well understood idea. Modern agriculture to be able to get water across different crops, what crops can be next to each other. What crop you plant here now is not the crop that you plant the next season. You rotate it because different crops have different effects on the land. So there's a system to doing this. And many of these formerly enslaved people know it inside and out because they were doing the work. They were doing the labor. There were also some Irish people doing the labor. There were some Mexican people doing the labor with them as well. So they already had the skills, and now as soon as they got the land, they became very prosperous. And this is where we saw some of the first Black millionaires pop up, which is insane to me. There was like a Black millionaire in 1850, but we're talking about Black millionaires, plural, before the year 1900, building beautiful towns. Now we get to this point where we have a few people out west that have negotiated things equally, legally, and receiving 35,000 acres as a Black man. That's incredible. Government cannot have that. So they start to renege on all this. They take the land back. They take the mules back. And this is when we get into the sharecropping era. So this is post-slavery, but it's not a lot better. So we basically got 2 years to be prosperous. We're wildly successful with it. And you have to remember from the last episode, there was a lot of Black skilled labor because people learned how to be carpenters, ironsmiths, people knew how to operate steamboats. So pretty much any profession that you needed, a whiskey distiller, they were there. Just like Jack Daniels. Everyone knows the story of Jack Daniels, where a enslaved person who was a great distiller helped him build the whole brand, helped him build every recipe, taught him how to distill whiskey. But since he could not go into commerce for himself, Jack Daniel becomes multi-millionaire. It becomes a global brand. And Jack Daniel, to this day, his family has a clause where if any person from Uncle Nearest family wants a job, they will be employed by Jack Daniels. I don't know. That doesn't sit right with me. But that's a whole nother episode. So as this land banking is happening and modern farming is really, really kicking in, we see two things happen at the exact same time. We see sharecropping, where that's a situation where the land was given back to the Confederate that owned it before. So black people ended up working on the exact same land that they worked on when they were enslaved. But slavery is illegal, right? So they made up a convoluted Looney Tunes ass system to make sure to always keep the black person in debt. So modern farming, I already said this, requires debt because you're really not making your money back until you get your harvest because you need the different seeds, the animals, the tools, because we're talking about farming on a gigantic macro level. Well, these inhabitants become tenants on the land where they're leasing the land, but the leasing contract is set up upside down. So they always end up owing more than they bring in. The reason it's called sharecropping is because they were never paid in cash. They're just paid a share of the crop. And they're not allowed to look at the records. They're not allowed to see what it actually sold for. So some of these people saw vast wealth increases. By the way, on the last episode, we talked about all these people getting some sort of restitution pay, whether it was just from the life insurance company or from the government for losing their property. Some got both. They got double indemnified. So they had massive amounts of wealth to be able to buy land plots, put people on these sharecropping farms, and also the thing that held it all together was vagrants laws. A vagrants law made it illegal to not have a job. So if you weren't working on one of these sharecrops and they caught you, you went to jail and you didn't go inside a prison. They put you on the field and they put you to work for free. So I want to tap in with you real quick before we get to the next part of this evolution. Being the man that you are and the assets that you're collecting, when you first learned about sharecropping, how did you feel? How did you process the information?
I mean, all of our history is a compound effect. It really just kind of reinforces the resiliency of us as a people, that through it all, we always found a way to make the best out of a terrible situation. When slavery was abolished, it just shifted. It evolved to another form of itself. And that eventually evolved into Jim Crow. And we watched us evolve through that as well. So at every phase of disenfranchisement, the presentation of the opportunity to advance and the limitations that have historically been placed on all of those advancements. You know, again, like I mentioned with the civil rights era, the fight came from what was presented to us as a people and that not being tolerable. And we adjusted and overcame. We adjusted and overcame as sharecroppers as well. So, I mean, when I think about every intentional hindrance that has been placed in front of us as a people, it has always amounted in us doing the things that need to be done for the greater good of society. Because again, the greatest benefiters of the civil rights movement was not us.
Yeah, you're right. And y'all, when he says white women benefited the most, it's because that's when they got the, women's suffrage was greatly helped by the black movement to get our voting rights. She got her voting rights. Then from there, she got her ability to bank as we got our ability to bank. Then she got the ability to own property outright and own commerce and to be able to explore different areas of education as we got them. So it was, there's still sexism in the world and we would never ignore that.
Right.
But really, through advocating for our own rights, we helped out these women to get to a different level. And it's always interesting to talk about with scholars, where I find out that like 40% of plantation owners during slavery times were white women. So it's a wacky relationship for sure. I really wanted to tap you in there before we went to the next part, because sharecropping was a terrible time. Like the ugliness of slavery is unimaginable, and neither of us live in the Black trauma space where, we're going to go on and on and on about the horrors of it. But what came next was not that much better. People were still beaten. People were still sexually assaulted. People were still put through the worst. It was just in a different way. And the same thing with Jim Crow. One of the arguments I always heard growing up is like, oh man, if Black men didn't dress like this, bad things wouldn't happen to them. Like, my uncle was lynched in a suit coming back from church. And then it's just like silence. It's like, exactly. Your ignorance is not accepted. I'm ready. So when we transitioned from the sharecropping age, because we were so good at farming that even though they took our land away from the vast majority of Black people, some people were able to hold on to their land, some weren't. There are cases after case after case where eventually that land gets taken away. But we started to get in a position where we could own our own land and we could farm it ourselves because we had the skills. And like I said, farming is now debt-based. That's the only way to make it work. So this is where we introduced the USDA. The USDA is supposed to be the governing arm that distributes capital to keep farming going. That's their whole job. That's it. And it's committee-based. And then what do we know about committees? You have to vote. What do we know about voting with Black people? We couldn't. We couldn't for the vast majority of time. So the men that would run these committees were the grandsons of the generals that fought for the Confederates. So we saw a stark difference in the fundability of Black farms. Black farms got 50% of the funding that they advocated for, where white farms normally got 100%. White farms normally got their funding in about 30 days. The average time for a Black farm to get approved from the USDA is 387 days. That is, anybody in the world of business knows that if you can get your capital in 1/10 the amount of time as your competitor, you're going to beat them 99 out of 100 times. And the one time you don't win is because something out of this world had to happen to allow the other guy to win. But these guys prevailed and they kept pushing. Like, I just see you shaking your head hearing those numbers. Yeah. If we leap forward and we look at, 1997, that's where we saw the Black Farmers Alliance, suing the U.S. government, suing the USDA, and they won. Unfortunately, they only won $2 billion. So most of these Black farms received $20,000. Now, there happened to be one bigger farm who's probably the biggest payout. They got $7 million, and they were able to repurchase their land. That's the Scott family. They are legendary in Mississippi. Man, you want to talk about doing things ahead of time? We're talking about some Jack Johnson energy. Talking about, I'm the champion of the world. Police officer pulls you over. That'll be $25. Here's 50 because I'm coming back just as fast with my white woman. Peace. Like, you want to talk about doing things? The way these guys farmed, they out-yielded everyone. Even with the USDA giving them 50% of what they needed, even with the USDA, taking almost a year to give them the funds they needed to have a good harvest, they crushed it. Catfish farming, everything.
Can I add into that? So it's interesting that we're having this conversation right now, just to kind of tie the historical reference to what's going on right now. John Boyd Jr. is
Mm-hmm.
a fourth generation Black farmer and represents the Black farmers of America.
Mm-hmm.
So he was trying to attend a recent White House farm meeting and was told that the administration is moving away from DEI and moving away from the Black farmer issue.
It's the exact same thing. It's just more well documented now. That brother is powerful, and he has created a giant collective of Black farmers where they know now, hey, we got different funding sources. We don't just have to go USDA, and they fund each other where they can. Now, unfortunately for Black farmers, they don't get to sit on a ton of profit and buy a bunch of crazy stuff and just build uber wealth. More so, they create wealth reserves because they may or may not get USDA funding, and they may or may not get alternative funding so that they can fund each other in their farms. Hey, I got a little money. I know you got a little money. Let's help this guy out. Let's make sure the numbers are right. Let's fly down there, look at the crops, look at the soil, make sure he's doing the right thing. If he's doing the right thing, let's give him the money. I love it. He's so powerful. And he is a huge, huge proponent of keeping the Black cowboy lifestyle alive. Like, my father grew up on a farm. His father grew up on a farm. I can't say I grew up on a farm. Now, I've grown up doing some ranch hand work and doing some different things here in Colorado, but it's very different than what they experienced in Arkansas, where you just live on a farm life. Now, one of the most interesting things, Black History Month fact for you. Do you know what the first filmed image ever was? It's a Black man on a horse. The very first stitching together of photos to make a motion picture is a Black man on a horse. And it's so interesting when you get into the history of the Black cowboy, because cowboy was like a pejorative term for Black men that worked with horses, because white men were cattlemen or cattle ranchers. And for one reason or another, that name cowboy, it got hot. And all these stories are coming out. And then, they did what they do, and they've reclaimed it and try to make it seem like it never happened. And it's, man. But we know who the baddest lawman was to ever exist. So, like you said, this perseverance to just keep going, keep striving. Now, between the years of 1950 and 1960, 6 million acres are lost. 6 million from Black farmers only. So that's not just plots of land that Black people owned and lived at. We're talking about people that were operating as farmers. So it's untold millions and millions of acres that were taken through this. We also had eminent domain. And then before eminent domain, development induced displacement. It meant we have to take your land because it's for the best of the most, which you're not included in. But it's a crazy idea to think about people working land that was unworkable, rotating crops in a way that made the land fertile, irrigating this farm in the most efficient ways because they had the least, coming up with all these different recipes and whatnot. That's partially why a lot of soul food isn't that healthy, is because you had to make do with what you had. And if you're not eating every day, you probably need more fat and salt to be able to work and work and work in the heat like that. If you're not working in the heat like that, you probably shouldn't eat like that. should probably eat more like Jesse and eat a whole lot more vegetables, you know? So we're starting to bring this episode to a landing, but I just want to point something out, just like I did in the last episode. The first part is that when we talk about assets, the first assets that were ever traded at the New York Stock Exchange were bodies like Jesse's and ours, Jesse and mine. And we're incredibly thankful to be born when we are born with the opportunities that we have to be able to talk to you guys. But the second thing to talk about is I wish I knew when I was younger the heritage that existed and how it was dismantled systematically. Because I would have, you're younger and you have someone that's not black, ask like, hey, why are black people poor in like every city? And you're like, why are they? I don't know. I'm 7. I know about slavery. They're like, but in the next episode, we're really going to talk about property, redlining, loans. We're going to talk about all that kind of stuff. But we can't skip the destruction of every major black city that's ever existed. That's why there's only one Harlem now. There used to be Harlems all over the United States. Greenwood built itself back. We got Rosewood, but the vast majority of thriving black cities are either repurposed into land that is like general public use. It might be a highway now, or even if we're talking about New York, Central Park. Central Park was 2 black settlements, okay? And we know about Seneca Village, but before that, we had Orville. Orville was thriving. It was well-to-do. You had every type of profession that you needed there. I mean, they're crushing it. They get ran out of that area, and that gets turned into a lake. That is the lake that's there in Central Park. And it was a big trend in the early 1900s to just put black towns underwater. So people get ran from there to Seneca Village. And then Seneca Village, they're like, wow, it's really pretty. I love what they did with it. We're going to take that too. And that's why it's Seneca Park or Seneca Park Village if you live there, which is Sengolese. So it was settled by Sengolese people. Now, if I ask your average person, like, how many cities do you think they put underwater? You're going to be like, 30, 40? There are over 110 black cities that were put underwater. We're talking Mississippi, Florida. We're talking Arkansas. We're talking about near Fresno. We're talking about New York. So it's the entire nation working in here. And again, when we're talking about this diagnosis of things happening, we're talking about policy, not people. We're talking about the policies existed in a manner where people could not outwork the system. And with that intentionality, you know what the result is going to be.
As I'm listening to you brilliantly breaking down all of that intentional sabotage and thinking about how that translates into how things flow now, unequivocally between Atlanta and DC, those are like the black cities in the United States. Well, in Atlanta specifically, there's been a sustained campaign to separate Buckhead from the Atlanta City corridor proper. It's a sinister thing because by doing so, it separates a major tax base within Atlanta, which impacts how folks of Atlanta are in turn serviced. So they do these covert flooding the city in the past was far more sinister and like you could see it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, actually, let me revise, because the sinister nature of what happens now, because it's so like concealed and cloaked, as nasty as the intent behind the flooding of a city historically. And when we talk about the redistricting, the district lines, and how that,
Yeah, district gerrymandering for voting.
the sinister folks have learned and evolved, is you don't get good PR. And like, I smile now even saying that, because the current president has been on a campaign lately of, they get bad PR. And it's like, well, when you do bad shit, people don't respond positively to it. Like, that's kind of how that goes. Well, historically, it don't bode well to flood an entire town. That wouldn't really go well now, from a PR perspective.
Right.
So
It's
how do you achieve the same effect?
it's interesting when your goal is the same, when you are strict on your goal, but you're flexible on the methodology. There's positive ways to use that, but it's also negative ways it could be used against you. And that's what we're seeing. And, I want to make a quick correction. I said it was Orville. That's Lake Lanier. So that's that's West Coast, where it was York Hill in New York that was taken, and people fled to Seneca Village, and then that was also taken to become Central Park. Man, it's just incredible. Like all these different cities, all these beautiful people. Like I never knew going by Delta Park in Oregon, um, that it used to be called Vanport, and it was a large, thriving black city. So we're talking about Oregon, we're talking about up in the Northwest. So it is not just the Deep South, it is not just the Confederate states. We're talking about Union states. We're talking about territories that weren't even added until after westward expansion happened, and they did the exact same thing. Not even too far from us, it was one of the biggest Jim Crow towns, period. Golden had like a giant 45-foot sign that says, we observe Jim Crow in our city," to let you know it was a sundown town. And it's interesting. For many years, I didn't really get why they wanted you out before dark, besides the idea of you thieving, being violent. It's like, okay, but if I'm a thieving, violent person, wouldn't that be my MO at all times? And I got that it has more to do with mixing cultures. Because when you have drinks with people, you break bread with people, you learn about your commonalities. And when you happen to be, possibly a handsome black man, and you're well groomed and you have a different mindset than some of the small town guys there, then you end up getting you a young filly, and now you got a mixed baby, and now you're in a very interesting position where racial based laws start to fall apart when you have white and black people both agreeing on justice and fairness.
And that is a direct danger to the folks that want to maintain the division and distraction from the things that are really happening, the true sinister things that are really happening. We got to stay distracted with these little nonsense things.
It's so effective, man. Because like when we talk, we always have the most productive conversations ever. And like when we talk, I'm thinking about W.E.B. Du Bois saying, land hunger is something that is almost mystical to the black man. To own something of your own to have your own property when you were once property. Like, that gets me hyped. I don't know how someone can't feel that flowing through their veins and want to do better for self. But instead, I got people arguing, it's the worst Super Bowl ever. It's the best Super Bowl ever. Well, I just want to let you guys know I didn't watch the Super Bowl and I don't care about the Super Bowl or Bad Bunny. Okay, but you made a post about it. So you are still involved in the whole process. That's why, you come to the asset class so we could have high level conversations about high level things, about stacking assets, about building businesses, about acquiring cash flowing businesses, because the largest wealth exchange ever is happening. I can't wait for you guys to tune in next week when we get into some higher level real estate stuff. Now that we set the foundation with land, yes, you see what I did there. We can really build upon that and build on concepts that's going to take us to modern day and how we can start leveraging these different assets to build our own wealth.
So there are 13 weeks in this first quarter, and we are currently in week 7. Time is waiting for no one. So this is a good little reminder to check in on how week 7 of the year is looking in comparison to the goal for the year. In order for us to be on pace to hit our 2026 revenue goal, we got our quarterly plan that has been established that takes into account the ebbs and flows of seasonality. So in that, we know how much of our total revenue for the year of 2026 needs to be happening in quarter 1. So as we are at week 7 of the 13, if we not halfway to our quarter 1 goal, then we hustling backwards and setting ourselves up to be disappointed at the end of the year. So good little kind of progress report check-in. We in week 7, and let's make sure that we are on a path to end the year strong, 1 quarter at a time. And with that, it's been my man Earl.
My man Jesse.
It's the Asset Class. Thank you for listening.